It's time to wake to sleep with Sleep Science Today, where we learn to sleep well with your host, Andrew Kolsky on UK Health Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Sleep Science Today. I'm your host, Andrew Kolsky. On this show, we speak about sleep and the science behind sleep. Our guest today is Nick Littlehales. He is an elite sports sleeping coach. Nick, would you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi, my name's Nick Littlehales, and I'm an elite sports sleeping coach. Thank you.
Perfect. Nick actually has a lot of experience in this area, and we're going to learn all about that as we get going into the show. So why don't we just start off, Nick, with give us your background. How did you get into doing this type of work in the first place, and tell us about what that brought you up to today?
Yeah, that could be a long story, but we'll try and keep it short. It's I just fell into the sleep industry. It was, we'll keep that short, but I started working for a big comfort group in Europe, making bedding and mattresses and things like that. I managed to graduate to be their international sales and marketing director. So it was a big brand, and I had to do a lot of research and investigation into the world of sleep, which is not just about products. I think around the mid-90s, I became very disillusioned with the industry sleep because it was always something that was just taken for granted, and yet we knew how important it was. So I took what I had learned and purely by accident found myself in conversations with a football club in the UK called Manchester United, which was just down the road from my UK office. I was doing a bit of gardening leave because I was moving off to do something else, but I started some conversations with them, and the manager at the time was Sir Alex Ferguson, and he became intrigued by this period of time when we're asleep, that they do nothing with the athletes, the players. And if you don't know something about something, why not find out? So I was able to pass on some of my thoughts and my ideas. That developed into, we started looking at chronotypes of the players because they were training in the morning and the afternoon, which they'd never done before. We looked at the kind of things, their environments and what they were sleeping on and things like that. Simple stuff. And that sort of developed an interest into how the sleeping hours could not only help you mentally, but also physically from injury times and things. And that sort of started to create a little bit of an interest around performance.
Right.
So maybe players can perform better for longer and things like that. So we made a few key steps which kept the interest going. That developed into working with national squads and other Premiership football clubs. That then developed into working with British cycling and a professional team called Team Sky in the cycling world. And that was a whole strategy of trying to redevelop how cycling was perceived in the UK. And that was a very successful period of time. And that's when, during that time, there was a strategy which was called the aggregation of marginal gains. And that meant we looked at absolutely everything that could have a little 1% factor. And so sleep had to be part of that, obviously. And I was the person brought in to look at that with them. And over those 5 years, we made some massive gains. And so the world became extremely interested. And that culminated around 2012 at the London 2012 Olympics, where there was a lot of new Olympic records, gold medals on the track, on the road, and all that, in a very sort of high performance extreme sport called cycling. So it kind of, that's where it sort of really came together as maybe there is something that we can do in this space. And over that period of time, there was a significant change in social behavior, technology, and everything. So it was kind of indicating that we should look at this area in more detail, because we're providing new challenges for ourselves. And that's principally where we sit today.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So you actually were sort of, I guess, a pioneer in the beginning of bringing sleep issues into the sports arena. Um,
Well,
I
people
am curious.
certainly use these terms for me because, but at the time, there was no other sleep coaches anywhere. There was nobody talking about sleep in that sort of sense, other than get to bed and I'll see you tomorrow. And and really, all you had was a clinical aspect to sleep, which didn't really reflect. So it was quite a lonely journey that you question every now and again as why you're doing it. But thankfully, here we are today, and we're taking more notice of it. So it's been great. Yeah.
Right. So I'm curious, you're putting this time and effort into looking into the sleep and making adjustments and things with the athletes. Did you see any improvements in their performance?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you can't measure it in sport, you probably don't do it. So there's a lot of things that, if you go into sport and you're with coaches and managers, and it's all about performance and winning and achieving, and lots of training and lots of disciplines and motivation, is that they won't do anything unless they can clearly see that elements of their own personal performance can be improved or made more sustainable. So it was very, very clear, simple little things, to be honest, about if we just did a little chronotype profile track of the team, right, from the manager to the coaches to the riders, and even the parents of the riders, their close friends. And if you just looked at that, you could see the sort of correlation between, in simple terms, owls and larks, morning types, evening types, the sort of in-betweeners who sort of push themselves either end of the spectrum. But by doing that, you could redefine the training program, because anybody who's listening to this who knows they're a morning type person and they like to wake up with the sunrise and they're very keen and they're hungry and they want to get going, and then they just slow down as the four phases of the day appear, is
Right.
that if you're doing certain things at certain times of the day, you get better results, and you don't overdo things at certain times when us as humans probably would rather be doing something else, still positive, but not so cardiovascular aggressive. So immediately we could see that training data, by moving things around a little bit, respective to the group, understanding that the bosses were all morning type people, so they always loved to do things in the first two phases of the day and early. They didn't do things in the evening when other people would actually like to be doing things. So retaining information, tactics, mood and motivation, all of those little things come together to mean that we saw much better results from the data being collected. But then, obviously, of course, they were riding faster than the others. So that's the criteria: is are we going quicker and faster than our opponents?
Right. Right. So I think you sort of alluded to the answer to this question, but I want to get clear for myself. When you were working with the cyclists, for example, did you find that, the type of person who gets into that sport typically is either a lark or an owl, or did you find that they are across the board and there's no way to know?
There's definitely a way to find out, because I think when you're in just general conversation with somebody as a coach, you can, a bit like a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a counselor, you sort of manipulate the conversation to sort of see how they would react to certain things and certain scenarios. But I think the person who gets into it's a bit like elite swimmers, have very disciplined rules and regulations about when they train and early morning and things like that. So the cyclist is sort of, it's not like a lark or a AMer. It's more like a person who's in between, who pushes the boundaries of the 24 hours. And they're very disciplined. They eat very healthily, but their only thing on their mind is cycling on a bike.
Right.
They don't like walking because walking uses different muscle groups, and so they always want to be on a bike pedaling in a certain position. They would be very, very focused on everything they put in their mouths, nutritionally or anything like that. They'd be very conscious of illnesses, viruses, because that will affect their ability to train every day for hours, 365 days of the year. If they would take a day off or a morning off from training on their bikes, they would see that as failure. It would be giving the rest of the cyclists an advantage. So I think it's kind of one of those things that they literally, going to sleep for them was a waste of time because it took up time when they could be training or riding. So they had to be really convinced that if they present themselves to sleep for hours, is are they getting anything back? And all they wanted to get back from sleep was the energy and the motivation to go and do it all again. You know, so
Right.
it's a little bit sort of, but even in their world, if you take them away and put them on their little island, and we sort of get into that natural rhythm of our 24 hours and circadian life and dark, and when you put them in there, they quite happily wouldn't start the day till 10 o'clock.
Right.
Or some of them would be quite happy to be looking at the stars at night when the
Right.
others are curled up asleep. So it's sort of like when you move them out of the sport, there's that natural characteristic in play, but they camouflage it. Right?
Right.
And that's the bit that we found is if you don't camouflage it completely, then actually you can you can ride for longer periods of time. You can maybe go faster around a velodrome track. You can achieve certain things if you actually kind of do less physical training and do more mental physical recovery training, which kind of helps the whole process optimize what you're doing. So it was not easy, um, but as I said, all they wanted to know was if they do that and change that, have they won a gold medal? And if they win a gold medal, they love it. You know,
Right. Right. So, yeah, you
it's
also
not an
sort of,
easy, it's not an easy area to get involved with sport because you know, unlike the rest of us, I don't have to tell them to not drink alcohol, to not smoke, to have a great healthy diet, to look after their gut, train, do all the hours, do all this. Have a really disciplined approach. I don't have to tell them that, but that means they are extremely demanding on results. So it's easier to coach elite athletes because I can clear all these areas off anyway, but they are far more demanding if they don't get results. So it's not an easy place to go.
right. Right. Well, so, you said a little bit about this, but I was really curious. In my impression is that someone who works that hard in their sport and is that competitive about doing the best they can, this concept of, like you said, oh, sleep is just a waste of time. It is how prevalent is that thought, number one, and then number two, when you present to them the fact that sleep might actually help improve their performance, how much willingness do they exhibit to actually, follow you and give themselves the opportunity? But before you answer those questions, let me take a quick commercial break. We'll come back and we'll get the answers to those questions. So stay tuned here on Sleep Science Today. We'll be right back with Nick Littlehales. You're watching Sleep Science Today. If you enjoy our show, please help support us by pressing the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. It'll really help us get seen, and it'll help you stay informed. All right, welcome back to Sleep Science Today. I'm your host, Andrew Kolsky. Before the break, we were talking about athletes and their acceptance of sleep as a benefit to them. So I'd love to hear your answer.
I think, like I sort of mentioned before, when I started out, a conversation developed with a person called Sir Alex Ferguson now, and he's gained a reputation of being an extremely dominant leadership person, and was very successful. So not just in the world of sport and football, but in general terms. I think that's where it all starts, is if you've got somebody or a group of people at the top of any organization, and they have found something, or they're going along a particular pathway to take a group of players, whatever sport it is around the world, whether it's NFL or NHL, whatever it is, you're taking that group and you're trying to make them a team of individuals, and this is how you're going to make them better. Now, initially, you're probably going to get worse, right? You're probably not going to achieve what you want, but you've got to go on that pathway to find out and be able to achieve what you want. So it's very much down to if the key people in any organization believe that this is important, and we need to find a way. It's not like it's definitive, but we need to find a way of optimizing these hours for all of our own benefits. And sort of like Nick is going to help us do that, right? So it's not coming along with a definitive answer. We just drink this drink, or take 2 liters of water, or ride this bike. It's sort of like we need to explore these things and find out, all of us as individuals, as to what's going to be those little key factors for ourselves. So we can create some little tactics, we can change our behavior a little bit. And at the end of the day, we're only looking for a marginal gain. Now, collectively, a 1% factor across everybody in the organization is very significant. So they're kind of like, yeah, but I just get told to go to sleep when we've got nothing else to do. I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep. Sometimes I feel like I'm tossing and turning all night and getting too hot. Sometimes I can't even get to sleep. Sometimes I wake up way before the alarm goes off. And sometimes, pretty much most of the times, I don't feel that refreshed. It's only when I sort of get up and hydrate and shower and have some food and maybe start doing some exercise do I actually sort of feel like I've brought myself into the world. So it's kind of like, so what are we going to find in this taken for granted space? And the big thing that you get from them is that I said to them is, why are you wasting, it's not 8 hours, it's probably 10 pre and post, and the 8 hours you allocate to it. If you're surely in there, we're able to get some benefits from that rather than just ignoring it. So maybe we could do it quicker, Andrew. Maybe we could do it differently. Maybe we could change the rule book and go, you only need 20 minutes and you're done. Now, things like that to them sort of go, oh, so we can make it really smart. We can actually not waste time doing it without knowing. So we can do things that make it work rather than not doing anything. So I said, that's it, you see. So if I can get your habits to change and you do little things, every hour along that journey in the 24 hours, then when we present ourselves to sleep, the brain takes over, and the brain's a lot happier because we've been helping it along the way.
Right.
And so if it's happier, I'm using that narrative. I am talking to young athletes a lot of the time, and the science and stuff like that sometimes, leaves them a little bit mystified. So you sort of go, well, maybe if we could definitely get this lovely restorative sleep, which is only about 25% of your sleep time anyway, if you're lucky. So if we can definitely get that in any period we're doing, then that's really going to benefit you on the bike and the rest of your life. So what they kind of like was that I wasn't going to tell them to sleep for longer or sleep more. I was actually going to stop them sleeping without benefits.
Right.
And that's what they...
Okay, well, that makes sense. I can see how the psychology of your approach is effective.
Well,
So
it was a tough world. It was a tough world.
right. So I am curious then, as you progressed through what you were doing and you were learning more about how to approach sleep with these athletes and all, in the end, most up to date, what types of things would you do? In other words, if you started to work with an athlete that you had not worked with before, would you send them for like a full-blown sleep study just to learn more about their particular situation? Or what types of things would you do just to learn about them?
No, because I did sort of research that sort of clinical aspect of sleep and my role with my company at the time. I spent quite a lot of time with sleep professors and sleep clinics and things like that. But basically, my interpretation was, well, if I can find things in there that I can relate back to everyday people, and then put it across in a manner that they can stop taking it for granted, but at least feel like they're doing something about optimizing their sleep hours, then that's really my role. So I don't, you know, I'm not looking at sleep disorders. I'm not looking at sending people to clinics or getting them clinically tested. They will do that under their own. Um, they'll be driven to do that by advice from doctors because they've got serious sleep problems, right? So what I'm basically doing is getting a profile of Andrew, right? And what I'm looking at is to get a real picture of that individual, because sleep is very intrusive, right? It's for a lot of us, it's done in a very private place where only private things happen for us. It's something that is very private space, and we don't really want to be testing it because we get tested in everything in our lives, and we can come on to that with trackers and wearables and all the stuff. But it's sort of like it's my private place, and so if you're going to sort of wander along that journey, you have to have a bit of sort of psychology going on. You have to, I was in my early days, I was an aspiring golf professional, and I was coaching people to play golf, and they were a lot older than me. I was only 17; they were in their 50s or 60s or 40s. So that sort of ability to communicate, to listen, to find out the little things because we're all a little bit different. That's really where I start, is what's going on in their life, what do they know, what knowledge do they have, what sort of things are impacting on them, and then I can take that, and then we take them on a journey of what is their awareness of which of these KSPIs, which are KPIs but for sleep, KSP, key sleeping performance indicators. So I go, what is your knowledge of circadian rhythms? And back in the day, not so much now, Andrew, but back in the day, circadian rhythms, you might have well been talking a different language, right?
Right.
Like, what is their knowledge about that? And can you just give them a little insight into that and make them feel a bit more human-centered? You've got the chronotype, number 2, which is, if we've got that characteristic, well, let's try and work with it, not camouflage it. And you've got friends and family involved with that, you see. So it's not just about you, it's who influences you, from bosses, managers, your occupation, and your friends and partners. And then the number 3 was about sleeping in cycles. So just changing the perception away from hours and saying, well, if we use 90-minute cycles, because it's like 5 90-minute cycles is 7.5 hours, well, there's your 8.
Right.
15 in and 15 out, there's your 8. But it's 5 90-minute cycles. And the first 2 or 3 90-minute cycles, if you're in a clinic, is where we would see you trying to develop, these REM and non-REM deep restorative stages. But then it doesn't start looking so hard in cycle 4 and 5 because they're more like wake cycles. So you're able to shift their sort of mindset about what's happening while you're asleep. And then you can use that to say, well, there's 16 90-minute cycles if you create your own sunrise point, because the planet likes a sunrise. Everything else on our planet likes the sunrise. It's the kickstart to the day. So it's
Right.
your anchor reset point. So, and it's not like we all wake up with the sunrise, but It's when the alarm goes off or your natural wake for your occupation. So if we get that and say that's 6:30, for example, then keeping it nice and simple, I've got 16 90-minute cycles in my day from 6:30 through to 5 o'clock into 6:30, which is the final cycle. My first cycle of the day is 6:30 into 8. I've got cycle 7 and cycle 8. Well, if I'm in Spain, I might have a little snooze or a nap or whatever. So I can start to think about 4 phases of the day. I can start to think about what do I do in cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, how I can do little things so it changes it. Then what you do is then you're able to create a really sort of more natural rhythm to somebody's day. So they're not waking up going, oh God, I didn't sleep well. They're already going, right, I hydrate, get lots of light, I do this, I do that. Cycle
Right.
2, I'm doing this and that, so I stand by the window for 2 minutes and just get some of that lovely daylight serotonin boost. Or just stare at the sky, because that's a nice little shift. And then I do this and I do this and this. And I might even do my 30-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute little CRP. Should we change the words? That's a controlled recovery period. It's not a nap. And sometimes you'll microsleep, sometimes you don't, but it takes the pressure off phase 3. So what you do is you create a rhythm with some patterns and a bit more logic and things that they can do. And then you jump into the area of environment. And I completely focus. If I'm going on too long, just shut me up.
No,
But
no, this is great.
number 6 is always about environment. And I said, look, I coach people to sleep on the side of mountains, who are mountaineers, hanging in a sack because they got stuck up there because the weather changed.
Right.
I coach people who sail around the world on a boat for 3 months, and they can only sleep in a very multiphasic way, so many times every 3 or 4 hours for short periods because they can't do that. You've got parents who, when kids come along, their whole dynamics shift. So I said, what it is
Absolutely.
I coach people to sleep anywhere, anytime, on anything. So when you think about your bedroom and your private sanctuary and your fancy mattresses and your pillows and all this sort of stuff, they're all good and they all contribute. But if you haven't got a plan, if you haven't got a set of habits in play, then that bedroom is not going to put right what you and your brain hasn't been putting right. So it's kind of your investment into your bedroom is doing all of these wonderful things will not put the fact that your own personal approach is wrong. So be careful. And then the last one is interventions. And they were quite simple, like mattresses or pillows or maybe an eye mask or something like that, or back in the day. But now that subject matter is so vast that what we do is everybody, so those are the 7 KSBIs, is what are you using to help you sleep? Well, I take this supplement, or I take that melatonin, or I have this tea, or I listen to whale noises, or I have brainwave patterns, but it's all gone much broader now. So that
Right.
is really what you're trying to do, is saying if you dive into interventions in an isolated solution way, you will no doubt see some initial benefit because you're doing something positive, but they won't have a sustained overall effect, and they'll end up in the box gathering dust in a few weeks' time, or you've not been able to sustain it because it's costing you $12 a month, or $25 a month. You won't be able to sustain it. So I think that's where it goes. You wander down that route and we find all those little things. We're looking for those marginal gains. We're looking for little things about them and what they're doing. And then ultimately we come down and we just go, right, here's our ARP, here's our 16 cycles. And these are the things we're going to focus on that will help you, Andrew, go from 1 24 hours to the next one. And we stop thinking about Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We stop thinking like that in the slightest, and we go, as a human being, we're going to roll with our planet. We're going to take these little things in play, and we're going to stop wasting valuable time sleeping without benefits. We're going to stop worrying about it, that's for sure. because sleep anxieties, oh, my tracker's telling me I'm no good, and it's sort of like, it's great data, it's good, it's wonderful, but you can't let it come in and start telling you can't go to work, because I think sleeping, whilst I'm in sports and elite athletes and performance is key, but if you just look at general performance, it's not a true performance criteria as yet. It doesn't determine whether you fly, whatever you do. It's still got to get done. What you're doing tomorrow has to be done. So it's kind of like, it's more of an emotional, personal feeling type of performance factor that, yes, inside of there you'll get some real performance factors depending on who you are, but then in the real sense is, the more you feel like you're getting something from it, and the more you sense that you're doing something about it, like eating and hydrating and exercising, one of the little things I do for the younger generation is try to make it feel a little bit more proactive, is that sleep is not a passive process, is actually, if you put ing on the end of sleep, you change sleep and your perception of sleep, which is an inactive kind of process, but you make it a proactive process because it's called sleeping. So it's like hydrating and exercising and eating. It becomes more of a mindset of, am I doing something proactive about my sleeping, not
Right.
sleep, right?
So
So
let me stop you there for a second, because I got to take another commercial break. But when we come back from the commercial, I want to pick up there, and I also want to hear about your book, because you took all this information that you shared with us and you put together a book. So we'll be right back on Sleep Science Today with Nick Littlehales. You're watching Sleep Science Today. If you enjoy our show, please help support us by pressing the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. It'll really help us get seen, and it'll help you stay informed. All right, thanks for coming back to Sleep Science Today. I'm your host, Andrew Kolsky. Nick, you were just giving us a whole background on the important factors for sleep, and I wrote it down here. You call them the key sleep performance indicators, KPSIs, and you had put together a book that was became a bestseller, I guess. Can you tell us about that? What's in the book? How did you get there? And what do you see moving forward?
I think it happened around 2015. A big publishing house called Penguin Random House contacted me because they were trying to find slightly different angles on certain health aspects, and one of them was sleep. They'd researched me and they wanted me to write the story. It was very overwhelming because I wasn't looking to be putting myself out there, but the book ended up to be called Sleep, and we gave it the title. So there's no sheep or nighttime skies or nice lovely people in bed with their feet hanging out. It's got a power button on the front. And it literally was The Myth of 8 Hours. Now that was very controversial, but in there, it's a very simple book. It'd probably take you 90 minutes to read with the R90 technique, but it was put together in a story. So it's kind of like it's relatable. So in each sort of chapter, you explore these little things, but in a as if you were reading a story about people and about what they do and everything else. Now that became very quickly a bestseller in its category. It's gone into 18 languages, so it's pretty much every sort of language around the world. It's been very successful in places like China and Japan and in Europe and in the US. And so that's the little book. It's still available today, some 10 years on, which is unbelievable. There's a lot of sleep books around these days.
Right.
Some are very scientific, some are very successful. There's a lot of people in that sort of space, but I think, as you pointed out earlier on in our conversation, that journey for me started in 1998, and that was a long time ago. And at that particular time, it was considered to be a game changer, a groundbreaker in how we perceive sleep. So it's still worth a read today. But to very quickly say is, which I'll come on to, is we've also I've created what's called an R90 playbook, and this is a printed version, right? Which has got lots of things in it.
Oh, wonderful.
But actually, it's available on Amazon Kindle as a digital one. You can get it down onto your device. It's £6.99, well, £9.99. You get it onto your device. You can flick through, scan through, and you can pick what you want to do. But basically, that's what I use to help elite athletes find their way through all the sleep noise and all the heightened awareness so that they can start doing something tomorrow. So I thought I wanted to do that because I'd become a little bit even more disillusioned that I haven't seen too much evidence, apart from some of the clients I work with and organizations, but that's still a bit random. But I think we've probably created too much exposure to sleep. We're being bombarded by lots of things which you can't always trust, certainly from the device tech and supplements and interventions. So I think I wanted to write that to sort of give everybody the opportunity to go, well, if I know those key things, no fluff, no stupid stuff, just da 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 da, you can create your own R90 technique at the end with your little planner and templates. I literally wanted to, that was my dream, my goal was to share everything I've learned and make sure as many people around the world have got access to a very simple thing, so that they can at least have that, as a toolbox, so they can make good decisions about everything else that they might come across in the world of sleep.
Right, right.
And that's really what it was about.
So that's great, because there are so many people these days that are, even if they're not trying to become an Olympic gold medalist, they're just into their particular sport or something, just even if it's just a hobby. And they like to perform well, and they like to do the things that will help them. So I'm curious to hear your input then on the fact that, okay, so let's say I'm just an amateur bike rider, but I'm trying to do well. I get out on a road bike, whatever. So I can have a watch, like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or any of the electronic devices. I can have all these different types of trackers out there. Now AI is getting into the field, being added to all these things. What are your thoughts? Are those helpful? Are they harmful? Is it depending on the person? What do you recommend?
I said, if you can't track it in sport, you probably don't do it. But some of the things are a little bit more, from a psychological aspect and brain training and your mental approach. But I think in general terms, it's absolutely great, because we are a society of trying to be as healthy as we possibly can, and we want to continue to be like that. And it really creates some great information. I think in general terms, you don't say that they're not good, because they're very successful and we love them. What you do have to sort of say to yourself, it was a bit like, back in the 90s, suddenly I was wandering around with a notepad and pen, and then suddenly I end up with a phone, and then next week I've got a laptop, and the week after that, I can communicate with my friends in Australia on a Skype call,
Right.
So it's kind of like, what you always have to sort of take into account is that, and this is what I really do, even now we've got all of this, is just to keep in mind that a nice human-centric approach to your 24 hours as a human being, how you approach those health pillars and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, is that is really important. And the health trackers and everything else and sleep trackers, they provide you with data, but you've got to sort of be conscious of what data you want and what from that data is going to have the biggest impact on you. So it's kind of like managing it, just like social media. It's not like it's bad, we love it. And it's getting even better. And give it another 2 days, and the emerging technologies, we won't have a clue whether we've got a ring on our finger or we've got a watch on our thing. And you just go, wow, that's great. But it's a bit like, you have to be very careful about what's fake on our communication tools and what we watch, because it's so good, you don't even know it's me right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's a bit like that. The data that's being collected you really do need to be very careful that that data that's being collected is truthful and not going to lead you up a pathway of going in the wrong direction. So I think that's where it sits. And I wanted to mention before that my book came out in 2016. Then we had the pandemic period. And during that pandemic period, I got exposed to a lot more demographics, right? Because anybody can read the book. And so I was coaching surgeons in America, right? I was coaching doctors, parents, perimenopause and menopause ladies. I was military, pilots, politicians, male and female, whatever it was, were piling into my space, basically just proving the fact that even when you've got all of these things around you, the basic thing about sleeping is to find a lovely rhythm that you can kind of sustain. And when you get that rhythm, sleeping becomes quite easy and very productive. It's all these other things that sort of get in the way. And it's not about slowing down or doing things. But I tell you what, yes, I'm in elite sport, but the people I've actually been able to help most or who benefited most from reading my book or the playbook are people who are in certain periods of their lives. They've got challenges, whether it's disabilities, mental health, hormonal health, all this sort of stuff. They find the opportunity of going from cycle 1 to cycle 2 and having a nice little anchor point. And they find that to be really beneficial because it takes the pressure off. Everybody else is sleeping 8 hours, but I can't do this because of the challenges I'm facing. So it kind of, that's been the most rewarding. So yeah, get a tracker, get a wearable, but there are other ways to keep on top of your health and well-being, as well as.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to stop us there because we are actually out of time. So this has been incredibly interesting, and I love the approach that you've taken with those particular steps. I encourage people, if they're interested, you've got it in a book. It's a great place for them to go and get the information. So Nick Littlehales, thank you so much for joining us on Sleep Science Today. Hopefully we can have you back in the future and get some updates.
Absolutely. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Sleep Science Today and learning how to sleep better with your host, Andrew Kolsky, on UK Health Radio. For more information on how you can achieve better sleep, go to sleepsciencetoday.com. Remember, sleep science today and sleep better tonight.